Welcome everyone and good morning. I hope everyone is doing well today. My name is Jeff Chapman. I'm the Content Marketing Manager here at InOrbit. We are thrilled to have you today for the webinar that we're running, Bringing Automated Cleaning to Scale. Today we are going to be talking about the role of automation in the cleaning space and what some of the unique challenges are, how the space is evolving, and of course, what are the larger implications. If you're not familiar with InOrbit, we are a cloud-based, robot-agnostic fleet management, data analytics robot platform that allows operators and engineers to orchestrate and deploy robots at a global scale. At the core of our business, of course, are effective robot operations, or RobOps, as we like to call it, certainly critical to any scaling of automation. A few housekeeping notes. Today's webinar will be 30 minutes long. We are recording today's session for posterity. We will be taking questions, so please, if you have any questions, feel free to write them down in the chat, and we'll circle back to them as we can at the end. Now, I am going to move on to introduce our host for today's meeting. We have the InOrbit CEO, Florian Pestoni, who will be joining us along with our special guest speaker. Florian.
Thank you so much, Jeff. So it is really a great pleasure for me to introduce Buck Ward. Buck is really a pioneer in the space of automation. It's funny, in the bios, they always mention that somebody's a veteran in a space. Well, Buck has really been throughout the space, from service to manufacturing to retail applications, and has been working with robots longer than a lot of people in this webinar have been alive. So it's really a great pleasure. And then Buck, you have, you'll tell us a little bit more, but you have experience going from startups to, running major companies. You created 7 major autonomous mobile robot projects, which is incredible. And you've built, you've sold, you've franchised cleaning companies. So really a great experience in building services, robotics, and I think we're going to learn a lot from you. Welcome.
Thank you, Florian. It's great to be with you. Great to be with everybody today. Yeah, we like to say we figured out all the ways it hadn't worked over the last 35 years. So I'm just so excited to see where the industry is today and where the technology is today. My love for robots started back in the mid-'80s, and that love has never gone away. It's been a passion. The journey that I've had, I've met tremendous amount of great people who share the same passion. It's tremendous to look at the way things have evolved. I've got a contract cleaning background, which is where this whole thing started. It was a problem looking for a solution, and so I lived a lot of the problems that automation and robots are specific to firsthand. I ran that company for 20 years and sold it in 1999 and took a lot of the proceeds and bought the RoboKent division from Nilfisk Advanced and relocated it from Elkhart, Indiana to Richmond, Virginia, and renamed the company Intellibot. So I'm very pleased with that. But I'm most excited about the team that I'm working with today with Cyberclean. One of whom is my brother, who's been with me for 38 years. He's still talking to me, which is a good thing. And then I've also a lot of the former Intellibot guys that I work with who have, I think, together as much experience in this space as anyone. Some of them go back 20 years, and I think all of us share a common passion and love for what's going on, and what we see today and everything that's going on is just so very exciting, and I'm thrilled to be a part of it.
That's fantastic. That's a great perspective, and the fact that your team is following you in your new in your new adventure, I think is, speaks volumes. So let me try to set the stage. So I mean, you've seen tremendous change over the last few decades, but the last year and a half, it feels like it has accelerated. It has gone into hyperdrive to some extent. So I'd love to hear from you, kind of like, what do you see, like expectations from the market, how those are changing, how those have changed over the last, let's say, couple of years?
Sure. Well, obviously everything that goes up has to be cleaned, and I think everybody fundamentally has always known that clean is important. But it took the C word, in a pandemic to really bring front and center what we've all in the industry have known has been so important for so long, and that's the fact that things need to be cleaned. And I think you look at a lot of different companies that are in the space, and whether it's floor cleaning or whether it's disinfection or what have you, they all see this opportunity and are filling a need, a very important need. The other component to it is the facility owners and managers. I mean, they're looking for ways, and employers are looking for ways, obviously, to make their employees or make their tenants or make their guests, if you're a hotel, feel comfortable coming back into the space. And that's very difficult in this environment. But I think it plays nicely into the fact that clean is so important now. And so what do we need to do, and how do we allocate staff when we've had issues with finding staff and doing things that are most important to keep things as clean as possible?
So I think, as you mentioned, labor is I would say an endemic problem in the space, but I think aggravated more recently. And we're seeing similar challenges in other industries. For example, in logistics and supply chain, we've had another webinar here where we talked with a former executive at DHL. So to me, what's interesting is in other industries, automation is being brought in to help address some of these major challenges. So is automation changing building services already?
Absolutely. I mean, you've got some tremendous pioneers that have actually made this a reality, starting with Brain Corp. They've just done a tremendous job proving that this can actually be done, where before, particularly in the early 2000s when we were at it, it was mostly concept. But the need is there. You look at pricing in buildings and what they pay for services. Building owners and managers pay for cleaning services. If you look at the real pricing today versus even 10, 20, even 30 years ago, it's the same. And if you factor in inflation, it's actually less. And so at the same time, you've got wages that have increased, and you've got this problem of finding labor that has not gone away. We've got a really exciting initiative going on with HCA. If you talk to the EVS manager in these facilities and you say, what's your number one problem? It's getting the job done. How do I get my job done? On any given day, I'm X number of FTEs short. It takes a while to vet somebody and bring them in. And so automation, I think, plays a role in filling a tremendous void. It's not replacing people, it's filling a void and allowing the EVS manager or the supervisor or the management or the building service contractor to actually get the job done.
Fantastic. And HCA is in the healthcare space, correct?
Correct.
So I think we all at some level, whether we're in the space or not, are familiar with the concept of a Roomba. And that's one robot cleaning one small space. I think the challenges get more interesting, more unique as you try to do it at scale across multiple floors, across multiple locations, across countries. So I think an interesting problem is, how do you scale? How do you go from a handful to hundreds or thousands, as some of the companies that you mentioned have done? So what have you found are some of the unique challenges there, and what can be done about those challenges?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's many successes and there's lots of sales traction, and there's the beginnings of what I think is going to be some very significant market acceptance. Again, thanks to the pioneers such as Brain and their partners. But the challenges are really twofold. One is most all of the robots being deployed are what's called cobots, and a cobot, of course, is dependent on a human operator to function, and either whether that's putting in fluids or putting on pads, or taking it out to the starting location, or taking it from floor to floor if it's a multiple-story building. All of that requires human intervention, and that, in my opinion, is the Achilles heel. While I think we've made great strides in how man and machine work together, we haven't solved that problem. And I think we see it in the underutilization or lack of optimization in the field. And I think it begins with understanding the process of what goes on. You take a retail store, for example, a Target, or anything, Walmart. And what's done on the hard surface floors? Well, it's dust mopping first, it's scrubbing, it's then burnishing, and then behind the burnisher, you've got to run the dust mop again, and you got vacuuming if you've got carpet. And if we're selling one machine that does one of those tasks in there, it then becomes, okay, how do you integrate it in a way that optimizes that process? And that has proven to be very challenging. And we need to figure that out. By the same token, you look at these various tasks, and I think an integrated system is something, again, if you're thinking of all the daily floor maintenance that's being done, if we as an industry, the automation industry, look at the whole process as an integrated system where all of these things function, all these tasks, robots to do certain tasks, all function together, I think that begins to address optimization and market acceptance and what I think we all want, which is tremendous market adoption, and we change the status quo, and that's where we're all trying to head. The challenge there is, with all of the exciting opportunities that are coming from literally all over the world, from all sorts of companies, which again is just extremely exciting to me, is they're disparate technologies. They're from different companies and different robot operating systems. There's different user interfaces. So how do you get them all to work together? If you buy into the fact that it needs to be an integrated process, then where do you go to find the automation solution, and how do you control it, and how do you use it? And I think that becomes the real challenge. Getting a user interface, getting a user interface that's friendly and integrates it all into a single control panel, and to collect data or see data either real time or at the end of the day to know what's happened or what didn't happen. I think all of that's extremely important, and something that I think where we're headed now, we're not there yet, but I think that's where we're headed.
Wonderful. And I mean, you touched on this idea of cobots, and you also mentioned it's really augmenting, complementing the work that people do. So I know you have this very unique perspective on what you call cyber techs and the role of people and robots working together. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about that.
Sure. Well, we've taken the perspective that with a cobot, again, you have to have someone working with it in the field. So what does this person do, and what kind of skill sets do you give that particular person? And where I think we're beginning to get some acceptance and some traction is that this person is not only working with the robots as part of the team, doing the things that the robots can't do, but is also providing first line of service and support on any problems that might arise where he's there on the job. And I think that's important. And I also think it's very important that the productivity gains that are achieved using automation, that the benefits of some of that productivity gains accrue to the operator or the cyber tech, so that they're rewarded for working with these machines. And it becomes, while it may be performing a manual task today that the robot can't do, I think where the industry is clearly headed and with great acceleration is to maybe it's not a totally autonomous solution, but I think to me that's the holy grail. We need an autonomous solution, and that cyber tech's role changes from doing the task that the robot can't do to supporting a whole array of robots that are in a facility, or it could be multiple facilities, say distribution centers, for example, supporting any service needs that happen there. So it's exciting to me. The cleaning industry typically are not high-paying jobs. So to be able to recreate a job or create a new job position and give it some status in an industry that really doesn't have a lot of status, I think is compelling. And I think a lot of companies have started looking at it, not just us.
So I know you're working with a lot of companies that are starting to incorporate automation into their processes. So if you had to pick, let's say, one thing they're doing right and one thing they're doing wrong, what would those be?
Well, I think these companies and particularly the leaders and even the startups, I mean, you've got to give them a tremendous check mark and support for taking risks in an industry where there are tremendous risks. And everyone has to be a visionary to see this, and everybody then has skin in the game, and they've jumped in to make these things happen. And I have great admiration for anybody in this space that's doing that. I think it's a big deal, particularly when you're changing the status quo and trying to create a paradigm shift. I think focusing on the cleaning itself, and particularly in industries such as retail, I think is very wise. I think if you can figure out the process and figure out the system of man and machine working in one Target store, then it's very likely you can figure out how you're going to work in 1,800 Target stores, at least duplicating that process. You've got the management and control system that becomes part of that, but if you can figure it out in one, you can figure it out in others. I do think from a perspective of where to focus effort and where the challenges are, I think this whole idea that I mentioned of process, looking at the cleaning as an integrated, complete process and not as an isolated task, I think will help with market adoption. And I also believe very strongly that autonomy, to the extent that we can reduce dependence on the operator, where you have self-charging, self-docking, self-dumping, and that can be accomplished and go out and do its job, move from elevators, move from floor to floor, calling elevators if it's an office building, for example, or a hotel. I think all of that is extremely important, not for success, because I think the industry has success now, and I think it's going to continue to evolve, and it's going to continue to grow in terms of acceptance and success. But if we really want to change the paradigm and we really want to create this big new industry that we all envision, I think we've got to move towards autonomous machines.
Absolutely. So, oh, go ahead.
Well, I would just wanted to shift gears on you, Florian, if I can, and just ask you a question, if that's all right.
Okay, yeah, sure.
You asked me what it takes to get it right and the challenges when it comes to automation, but I would be very interested in, from your perspective, how InOrbit views the world, where you see the challenges and where you see the opportunities, and how best to approach the problems.
Yeah, I think a lot of what you were saying before really resonates with how we see the world, which is this idea of people and robots and what we add to the equation, which is, smarts in the cloud. all of that working together is how you go and solve these like really challenging problems. So we use the term robot operations, or RobOps for short, to really capture, this idea of everything that you need to do, from deployment to running it every day to bringing more efficiency. You were talking about how many steps there are even in one of these seemingly simple tasks. You may need different types of machines to get the task done. So now you need coordination, or as we call it, orchestration of machines and people and processes working together. So that's really what we work on, and we find that it's in a way it's its own new thing, right? So it's a way to manage process, and as you go from like a single robot in a single location to many robots and many locations, I think it becomes even more challenging. So our goal for these companies is to offer them a single pane of glass where they can see everything working together. They can control, they can have this combination of people on site, and if necessary, people remotely. And all of this working together is a lot of fun, but a big challenge for companies. So our goal is to really help them get there faster, and as I like to say, maximize the potential of every robot.
Yep. Great, well said.
I think we have still a few minutes. Jeff, are we getting questions?
We could obviously use some more. I've got 1 or 2 questions that have come in, but if you guys have any more questions, feel free to reach out. I hate to interrupt. Obviously, you guys are having this really interesting and significant discussion points here. But I do want to make sure that we're taking some time for our attendees to get a chance to speak directly, especially with you, Buck. So I have one that came in here, and I know you touched on this during your conversation, but can you talk to us about I know you talked about the different sort of use cases and the significant challenges faced in the cleaning space, but what do you see as the most viable new use cases coming up in, say, the next 2 years?
Well, I think we're kind of we've been focused on cleaning the floors, and that's extremely important, or whether it's scrubbing or vacuuming or whatever. Disinfection, of course, we talked about. But I think one of the sleeping giants is data collection. And as a machine goes through and does something, it cleans the floor, it has the ability, or at least the potential, to capture a lot of data and information about its surroundings. There's a company in Northern Virginia called SRT, which is focused on the Internet of Things. And when you start looking at what cleaning is done in a building, and you look at the way people move throughout a building, think of an office building, everything is not traversed every day, and everything doesn't need to be cleaned every day. So things such as body counters or body movement counters, where the traffic is, and you can direct the cleaning routines, to handle the areas that need to be done. And maybe it's more than once a day. Maybe it needs to be done 2 or 3 times a day. And at the same time, the 17th floor, where the lawyers are not there, but once a month, doesn't need to be done every day. So this whole data capture environment, and particularly as it plays into clean, what's clean air? What's a clean environment? How do you know that it's really clean? How do your employees and people understand that this is really a safe environment? So I think this whole data capture opportunity is huge. And I think the industry, and I'm speaking of the commercial cleaning industry, as they begin to explore automation, ought to consider that as well.
Maybe if I can add to that, Jeff. So we have a white paper out on, just covering some of the trends in cleaning and building services. And one of the things we talk about is verifiable cleanliness. right? So you use data not just to figure out where you need to clean, but to essentially have an audit track of what has been cleaned and how frequently. So I think we're all used to seeing the sign-up sheet in public restrooms, but imagine that at a granular level for every square foot, knowing exactly when and how well it was cleaned. So I think I get really excited about those kinds of opportunities where it's more than just replacing, it's really creating a different level of service. So I think that's an interesting observation on your end, Buck.
Florian, if I could add to that, I know we're working with a very innovative commercial property management company, Tallheimer Cushman Wakefield here, and they are looking at automation as a means to validate cleanliness and validate services, and to the extent that they're starting to spec it into janitorial requirements, which is a big deal, because you know that it's going to be cleaned, you know that the carpet fibers are clean, the air is clean, and all of those things become extremely important. So you get innovators and the leaders out there like Tallheimer that I think understand this and are actually taking action to make it happen.
I'd love to get to one more question, but just quickly, sorry, I wanted to follow up quickly if I could. Buck, so do you feel like companies right now are positioned to action, to leverage the big data that's coming in from these robots? I mean, I know data analysis is such a huge part of it. Being able to pull those insights, to drive your business decisions is something that everyone's still struggling with, it seems like.
Yeah, my opinion is no. I don't think they're ready, and I think it's companies like InOrbit, like SRT, like Cushman Wakefield Tallheimer, who understand that this is the future and are building the infrastructure or creating new processes and new approaches that actually illuminate the problem. In some cases, they may not even know there's an issue. So, right. I think it's taking companies like yours and the ones that I mentioned that I think are very important to make this happen. And it will happen. There's no question it's going to happen. It's happening now. We just don't know it. It's not as obvious.
Well, do you think we have time to squeeze in one more question before we go? Let's try it quickly. This is, I guess, for both of you guys. So given the current state of autonomy exceptions for industrial robotics cleaning, what do you think the right structure for an operations team is to improve uptime and efficiency? How do you organize that operation?
You want to tackle it first?
I'll try to go quickly. I think you're going to need people on site, and then for anything that doesn't require somebody on site or right next to a robot, if you can make it remote, you're going to get huge efficiencies. You may have one person, supporting, as Buck was saying, 10, maybe one day 100 robots in different locations. So I think having that ability to combine people and robots in the right place and in the right ratio is super critical.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. And so on-site trained personnel, a remote monitoring system that can respond to issues real time, I think becomes critical. And then I think this other big piece to it, which I think sometimes gets shoved to the background, is change management. And you think about everything that has to happen and how we're changing in a really, really huge way, the way things are done. It has to, you have to think about culture, and you've got to think about leadership and what is being said and what talk is being walked or what isn't, and be able to address this whole management change management issue, which is going to be absolutely critical to success.
Well, that is great. Thank you so much. I mean, with that, I think we are hitting our time. I'd like to thank, obviously, our fantastic speaker, Buck. Thank you for such a wonderful conversation. Please feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions or you'd like to start a conversation with us, request a demo. We are, of course, here at your disposal. I'll thank you once again, Florian and Buck, for your time today. And thank you, of course, to all of our attendees for coming in. We really appreciate your time today. I hope you all have a great day, rest of your day.